Well, holy crap, look at that. Somebody who actually reads the entire document and doesn't stop where their narrative does. Hey guys, this is Jules with True Crime Reactions. Disclaimer. Everything stated in this video is my opinion and my opinion only. And just like everything else in these cases we discuss here on this channel, everything is alleged. So I saw that Leo Cake over on Twitter had shared this and then saw that a bunch of other people were also talking about this. So I wanted to share this article with you guys because I know that a lot of you that are here on YouTube are not over on other platforms, maybe video platforms like TikTok, maybe even Facebook. But a lot of the people that are actually over here on YouTube that I've spoken with, very few of them actually have a Twitter account, which was surprising. Now, this article is really interesting because this woman has done a lot of work regarding touch DNA and forensic science, and her name is Gerhard. I'm thinking that's probably how it's pronounced. She's not from the United States. She does a lot of her work over in Australia and in New Zealand. But let me just show you a little bit about the company that she works for before we get into this article so that you can see why I feel like it's important that we go over it. DNA expert reports and oral evidence, forensic science expertise from crime scene to court, for when your case needs unbiased, experience-based forensic opinion, not simply statistics. The answers are in our analysis. As Australia's preferred independent specialist in forensic biology, we're focused on presenting DNA expert witness testimony in various jurisdictions through Australia and internationally. By scrutinizing the integrity of evidence, we determine its reliability before reporting to legal professionals and police. Our advanced services extend beyond traditional DNA reporting, providing a true expert opinion on what the findings mean. And it says down here that they've worked thousands of cases. 3,000 laboratory examinations, 5,000 DNA analyses, interpretations, 250 crime scenes. And they have appeared as expert witnesses 110 times. So now that we know that she actually knows what she's talking about, let's go ahead and see what she has to say. Now, this is just a cover sheet that they're using to show the case that they're talking about. This seems to be a quote from an attorney named Misty Maris that states, "Without the DNA, there is a very different case." Yeah, I definitely agree. Mr. Kohberger is accused of the murder of 4 university students in November of 2022. The students were found to death at an off-campus house in Moscow, Idaho. Much of the high-profile criminal proceedings are centered around DNA testing, with the most significant piece of evidence being a DNA profile identified on a knife sheath found at the premises said to match Mr. Kohberger. The stakes in this case could not be higher, with the prosecution seeking the death penalty if Mr. Kohberger is convicted. The DNA in the Forensic Investigative Genetic Genealogy, or FIG. FIG is a method by which SNP-based DNA testing is used to identify potential extended familiar relatives. Publicly available genetic databases, like those used by the public to test their ancestry, are used to identify related individuals. Knife sheath. The DNA profile was generated from the knife sheath, along with a DNA profile suitable for FIG. It was the FIG investigation that identified the Kohberger family, which in turn led to the collection of a covert sample from the family house of Mr. Kohberger. An attempt has already been made to exclude this DNA evidence based on an improper procedure by the FBI. This was unsuccessful. Based on the available information, this appears to be the only DNA profile that has matched Mr. Kohberger. Fingernails. The DNA profile that appears to have originated from at least 3 individuals was obtained from a fingernail sample from one of the victims. While it is not uncommon to find mixed DNA profiles in fingernail samples, as we often have the DNA of the people we live with under our nails, it is important to attempt to identify these individuals. Mr. Kohberger appears to have been excluded from this DNA profile. Well, holy crap, look at that. Somebody who actually reads the entire document and doesn't stop where their narrative does. Bloodstain on handrail. It is reported that a bloodstain was located on a handrail in the premises. This sample generated a DNA profile, unknown male B. Payne said police did not pursue that person because we had already received Mr. Kohberger's name. It is unclear as to whether an identification was made on this sample or if the DNA profile is not identified. Correct again. Payne literally got on the stand, and in the transcript from the closed session of the hearing that took place on January 23rd, that's where we found that little portion out. He literally stated, and I'm not going to put it back on the screen, I will put a link for the video where we went through the transcript down in the description box so you can go back to the original reading of the transcript. But he definitely says there was a main suspect. And then they had the Kohberger DNA phone call from the feds on 12/19. It was after that they got the report about the unknown male DNA. They made some excuse about CODIS, and that was just completely bullshit. And then said basically that they were just going to get to it later. And they pretty much just never got to it later. And it all happened in that order. A main suspect that was not Kohberger. Then they got Kohberger's name. And then they got more unknown male DNA. And they just didn't even bother. Bloodstain on gloves located outside the house. Blood was located on gloves found outside the house connected to unknown male D. It may also be worth sampling the inside of the gloves if that hasn't been performed. While trace DNA has its limitations in court, it can be beneficial investigatively. Now, I remember it being just one glove, and I'm pretty sure that what we've heard the majority for the location of the blood on the glove itself is that it's actually inside the glove. Was it on right or was it actually on inside out? Can you tell on a nitrile type glove if it's on inside out? But again, for the majority, what we've come to understand about this is that it was on the inside of the glove that was found, and it was just one. Because you have to remember that other glove that Chris McDonut comes out here and tries to act as that glove was found like a week after the real glove, because the real glove was found on November 20th, and Home Dude and his wife didn't go down there until around Thanksgiving, almost a week later. Limitations of the DNA evidence. Based on current media reports, it appears that counsel is going to suggest that the knife sheath was planted. They've mentioned the word placed, but yeah. Is this really the most effective challenge to the evidence? I have outlined some key limitations below. Number 1, trace DNA. DNA like that collected from the knife sheath is known as trace DNA. This is the type of DNA where the biological origin of the DNA is unknown. This means it comes with significant limitations in relation to its transfer, persistence, prevalence, and recovery in the environment. There has been misleading commentary about this DNA by scientists in this case. This type of DNA, trace DNA, does not mean the item has been touched by Mr. Kohberger. It is also not possible to determine when the DNA was deposited. She's so smart. Yes, please. Number 2, unidentified DNA profiles. While it is not uncommon to have unidentified DNA profiles in a case, all appropriate avenues should be taken to attempt to identify them. A number of DNA profiles in this matter were not searched, as police had already identified their suspect. Well, the feds did. And then they actually just willy-nilly and blindingly just took their word for it for about 24 hours, because Payne literally testified that they got a phone call and it wasn't a small little family tree like we were originally told, at least not the Fed phone call. That actually came from Othram. They got a phone call from the feds on the 19th and just said, Bryan Kohberger is the guy that you need to be looking at. And again, according to Payne, they weren't told where the information came from, if it was a tip that they followed, if it was from DNA sampling. They didn't know. He claims that they didn't know. They didn't know nothing until the 20th. And then on the 20th, they got on a Microsoft team meeting and were shown the genealogy stuff, all of the DNA work that was done apparently. And only then did they know where Bryan Kohberger's name actually came from. So again, they got the phone call on the 19th and were just told Bryan Kohberger is your guy. And they weren't given an explanation, told how, why, or anything else until the next day. And we've always questioned why it's unknown. And now we have all these other unknowns, like this article reminds us about the mixture of DNA that was found under Maddie's fingernails, or in Maddie's fingernail clippings, shall I say, to be more specifically accurate. And yeah, she mentions how it's not uncommon for people that you live with to be on you when it comes to DNA. But there was a man in that mixture that does not live at King Road. But who was actually excluded? The suspect. Now, again, they try to say that they couldn't do anything with these unknown DNAs that came back to them in the report after they had Bryan's name because it was going to knock Bryan's information out of CODIS, which is actually ignorant. It's not correct. CODIS can do several runs at the exact same time. There's literally nothing that I have found that has said, yeah, that's accurate. That once you put one profile into CODIS, you can't put another one in there because it's going to knock the original one out and then you're going to lose everything. There was nothing to be lost if that was the case. Nothing. Nothing happened whenever they put Bryan's information, or shall I say, at first, the Sheath DNA sample into CODIS. There were no results for anything. So your lie doesn't even make any freaking sense for why you felt the need to lie to begin with. But if you're going to go through all of this drama to go and do familial DNA and genealogy on the knife sheath DNA, why did you not just go ahead and do the same thing for the rest of it? So we have this little bitty amount of DNA found on a sheath that in itself is not a weapon, and that in itself has also not been verified to be something that could fit or hold the weapon that they're claiming did all these things. They've yet to actually claim that. But you're going to take that, a sheath, a holder of something, over actual blood that needs to be accounted for, that you have multiple victims in this scene, and for you to test more than one possibility is just too much for your brain to handle? How is that even possible? Why genealogy was it ran on all of the unknown samples at the exact same time, considering that blood is definitely the king in the hierarchy of DNA and touch and transfer and trace is the literal court jester? It doesn't make any logical sense to me. The way that they did this is beyond reverse engineering, but the protocols and the way that they did things are also completely ass backwards. Number 3, misleading statements about DNA. A number of concerning and misleading statements have been made about all the DNA evidence in this matter. These include the laboratory manager referring to touch DNA and implying that the DNA on the knife sheath has been deposited by contact with the item. That is true, that it's in a document, and it definitely proves that they're full of shit because there's no way to tell that. If you can't tell us that it's epithelial cells or sweat or spit or hair dust or some crap that put it there, then you cannot sit there and try to pretend like it was via touch because you don't have enough to prove that, and they know that. The statements need to be addressed to ensure that the evidence can be appropriately evaluated by the decision makers in this case. There needs to be a clear instruction/guidance as to what the evidence does and does not mean. Not all of this crazy, stupid, muddy-watered bullshit that the state keeps trying to pull. Again, how do you sit there as somebody who cares about victims and cares about justice and be okay with the fact that the state just sits there and manipulates and gaslights the shit out of literally everything? They literally, at the grand jury, inputted that DNA mixture from Maddie's fingernail clippings, and it makes people who have no clue and don't know any better misinterpreting, not understanding, not continuing to read, not paying attention to context clues. Whenever it's just put in there all willy-nilly, oh yeah, Kohberger was inconclusive, and then that's where you stop, then you get the impression, just like Ann Taylor was writing about in the documents for her reasoning for all of these things, you get the impression that the possibility is there. You know, it's still there just a little bit. You haven't been able to completely rule it out, but that's not true because they did what the state should have done, and they took everything to an independent lab, and lo and behold, Bryan Kohberger is excluded. And they've got the paperwork to back it. They can't just say it and not have the receipts. Not in court. All of those things matter. So you're sitting there telling me that the person who the majority of people out here, especially on mainstream media, have been claiming was the actual main target and everyone else was collateral damage and he was completely fixated on Maddie. There's nothing about him on her mixture and her fingernail clippings? Nothing? Or arguing about somebody else's DNA being there and not your suspects? That's wild. Alarm bells are ringing. Girl, they've been ringing. Based on the reports published about this case, it definitely seems like there is significant scope for challenging the DNA evidence. There is significant risk for a miscarriage of justice of the DNA profile from the knife sheath is relied upon without significant other supporting evidence. I think this meant to say if. Right here. miscarriage of justice if the DNA profile from the knife sheath is relied upon without other supporting evidence, correct? As Ms. Maris stated, without DNA, there is a very different case. It should not be the case that a single DNA profile should be the make or break of a case of this seriousness. The DNA should be used in conjunction with other evidence, and they've yet to prove it. People can say, oh, the white car, oh, this, oh, that. Okay, but where's the proof that it's Bryan's? They've told us from the very beginning there was over 20,000 of these vehicles that match this description in the area. They cannot sit there and tell me that they actually followed his car perfectly in line. They've already literally proven that to not be true themselves. Statements like those made by Ms. Nowlin that touch DNA, which can come in the form of skin cells that are shed on items being touched, along with the lack of attempting to identify unknown DNA profiles as investigators have already been provided with a name, mean that the alarm bells are ringing in this case. The actions and comments in relation to the DNA in this matter only serve to demonstrate the prosecution bias of the scientist working on this matter. The defense team needs some strong support from an independent forensic expert in this matter to clearly and sufficiently highlight the limitations of the DNA testing in this matter. Have you seen any of these limitations in the DNA evidence in your matters? And that's where she's doing her little plug thing, I guess. Now, there's a few other things on that website that she wrote that I'm going to be looking through. If I see anything interesting, I'll do another video. Probably something about DNA and cross-contamination in other cases, because that's a really, really, really important topic. I mean, Lucas Anderson. But that's it for now, you guys. Let me know how you feel about what this forensic expert from a whole nother country all the way across the planet has to say about this case. It definitely seems like there's a lot of traction when it comes to the forensic DNA community looking into this. I mean, seriously, she's from Australia. I'm pretty sure that there's thousands of DNA experts across the planet in countries literally everywhere. They're looking at all of this and have their own opinions. It'd be really nice to hear from like a lot of them, actually. But for now, I want to know how you, my viewers, my people out here actually think about what this lady has to say. How on point was she about all of the issues? She basically touched on everything that we here on this channel and other people that actually talk about truth, facts, evidence, all the things that we've already been discussing. So it's nice to see that people that are actually on the level of having the education for it are also agreeing with all of the boo-boo that we down here are actually seeing. But again, let me know how you guys feel about it down in the comments. If you like the way that I present this information and give my opinion, please don't forget to leave a like on the way out. Subscribe to the channel if you were not subscribed already. And please don't forget to make sure that that notification bell is set to all so you don't miss any of my rants, reviews, reactions, updates, or deep dives. See y'all.